Welcome back to Chapter 4 of Things Fall Apart. In this chapter, you're going to get some more information about Akemefuna, who, if you remember from the end of Chapter 1, was the ill-fated lad that's come to live with Okonkwo's family. And you'll see how he's been integrated into Okonkwo's family and the influence that he has on Okonkwo's oldest son, Nwoye. And these boys are still pretty innocent, and I think you'll see that throughout the chapter. Also in the chapter, you'll learn about the Week of Peace, which is something that they observed in Igbo land. I'm not sure if they still observe that or if that's a tradition that has faded over time. Maybe you could look it up and let me know. Also in this chapter, you'll see some domestic violence, so be prepared for that. You remember that it's mentioned previously that when Okonkwo loses his temper, he's pretty quick to use his fists. So there's a situation there that you need to be prepared for that's pretty intense. So here we go with Chapter 4. "Looking at a king's mouth," said an old man, "one would think he never sucked at his mother's breast." He was talking about Okonkwo, who had risen so suddenly from great poverty and misfortune to be one of the lords of the clan. The old man bore no ill will towards Okonkwo. Indeed, he respected him for his industry and success. But he was struck, as most people were, by Okonkwo's brusqueness in dealing with less successful men. Only a week ago, a man had contradicted him at a kindred meeting which they held to discuss the next ancestral feast. Without looking at the man, Okonkwo had said, "This meeting is for men." The man who had contradicted him had no titles. That was why he had called him a woman. Okonkwo knew how to kill a man's spirit. Everybody at the kindred meeting took sides with Osugo when Okonkwo called him a woman. The oldest man present said sternly that those whose palm kernels were cracked for them by a benevolent spirit should not forget to be humble. Okonkwo said he was sorry for what he had said, and the meeting continued. But it was really not true that Okonkwo's palm kernels had been cracked for him by a benevolent spirit. He had cracked them himself. Anyone who knew his grim struggle against poverty and misfortune could not say he had been lucky. If ever a man deserved his success, that man was Okonkwo. At an early age, he had achieved fame as the greatest wrestler in all the land. That was not luck. At the most, one could say that his chi, or personal god, was good. But the Igbo people have a proverb that when a man says yes, his chi says yes also. Okonkwo said yes very strongly, so his chi agreed. And not only his chi, but his clan too, because it judged a man by the work of his hands. That was why Okonkwo had been chosen by the 9 villages to carry a message of war to their enemies, unless they agreed to give up a young man and a virgin to atone for the murder of Udo's wife. And such was the deep fear that their enemies had for Umuafia, that they treated Okonkwo like a king and brought him a virgin who was given to Udo as wife, and the lad Akemefuna. The elders of the clan had decided that Akemefuna should be in Okonkwo's care for a while. But no one thought it would be as long as 3 years. They seemed to forget all about him as soon as they had taken the decision. At first, Akemefuna was very much afraid. Once or twice he tried to run away, but he did not know where to begin. He thought of his mother and his 3-year-old sister and wept bitterly. Nwoye's mother was very kind to him and treated him as one of her own children. But all he said was, "When shall I go home?" When Okonkwo heard that he would not eat any food, he came into the hut with a big stick in his hand and stood over him while he swallowed his yams, trembling. A few moments later he went behind the hut and began to vomit painfully. Nwoye's mother went to him and placed her hands on his chest and on his back. He was ill for 3 market weeks, and when he recovered, he seemed to have overcome his great fear and sadness. Remember again, market weeks, 4 days, so he was sick for 3 times 4 days. He was by nature a very lively boy, and he gradually became popular in Okonkwo's household, especially with the children. Okonkwo's son, Nwoye, who was 2 years younger, became quite inseparable from him because he seemed to know everything. He could fashion out flutes from bamboo stems and even from the elephant grass. He knew the names of all the birds and could set clever traps for the little bush rodents. And he knew which trees made the strongest bows. Even Okonkwo himself became very fond of the boy. inwardly, of course. Okonkwo never showed any emotion openly unless it be the emotion of anger. To show affection was a sign of weakness. The only thing worth demonstrating was strength. And now think about why he would do that. Why Okonkwo would only show anger and not affection. He therefore treated Ikemefuna as he treated everyone else, with a heavy hand. But there was no doubt that he liked the boy. Sometimes when he went to a big village meeting or communal ancestral feasts, he allowed Ikemefuna to accompany him, like a son, carrying his stool and his goatskin bag. And indeed Ikemefuna called him father. It's important to note here that Ikemefuna has essentially been kidnapped from his parents and forced to live with Okonkwo. And now he's calling Okonkwo his father. What's happened is that Ikemefuna has developed a condition known as Stockholm Syndrome, and that originated in Stockholm, which is in Sweden, and essentially some bank robbers had some hostages and they treated them very well, and the hostages in the end decided that they liked the bank robbers and wanted to defend them and didn't want to press charges and those kinds of things. So Stockholm Syndrome has come to represent or come to mean somebody who has affection for their kidnapper. And that's happened many times, and you can certainly Google Stockholm Syndrome and find a lot of resources or a lot of information about it. But that's what Ikemefuna has. He's got this condition called Stockholm Syndrome.